Welcome to another coal painting table tutorial. Today we're taking a look at the new Gloomspite Gitz Squig Rider. Alright, so the model is prime black here, and we're going to do a all-over, basically just squig base coat here for scale 75 deep red. Don't worry about getting some on the Night Goblin, we're going to go back and fix him later. You're going to find out that the squigs here, and the new squigs, don't have, or have the ability to paint their heads separately. I highly suggest it because there's a lot of cool detail in their mouth, and it's just better to do that in a little sub-assembly here. Red highlight number 1 is scale 75's Antares Red. So, because red is a translucent color, and the benefit of the airbrush is diffusing it so we can actually see some of the colors underneath what we're putting on, I'm going to highlight the squig here in white, any places that I want to get brighter. Now, we're going to come back to this again later. I end up thinking it should be even brighter than it is right now, but we are going to just layer down some white across the body and across the face. Face will be off camera, to make sure that we get a better, brighter highlight. Once the white's dry, I'm going to go back in and use that same Antares Red, and you're going to see here that it's actually showing up brighter already. Now that's not because the paint is wetter, but it's because we can actually see that white showing up through this layer of Antares Red, and it actually just brightens up the paint significantly. This can be applied towards yellows really effectively as well, because it is in the same spectrum and level of transparency here as red. Now next we're going to get some color in on the mouth and the underside of the gullet. We're going to be using Scale 75's Indian Shadow as the base color here, and we'll slowly but surely be adding in Vallejo Model Air's flesh, just its basic skin tone. Across here, brightening it up, and brightening up across these clips until I find a tone that's appropriate. Now the hand of the mouth here is going to get base coated in Scale 75 basic skin tone, and then highlighted by mixing in light flesh as well as pale flesh. It's going to get a wash of Seraphim Sepia, while the rest of the mouth is going to get a wash of Carroburg Crimson. Now here we're going to go with the rest of the squig and give it a Carroburg Crimson wash, and it's at this point that I realize that the squig's going to be too dark for what I want it to be. Now, I'm not going to let that derail me. I'm going to just keep on painting the model, but we're going to come back later and then make it a little bit brighter and more fun to take a look at. So I reclaimed the Goblin with Scale 75's Eclipse Grey. It's a very close to black. And now here we're going to go in with African Shadow by Scale 75 on all the teeth to give us a base color for what we want his teeth to be. Great. Now that that's down, we're going to mix together some Tenere Yellow into that African Shadow, and you can see that it's Tenere Yellow is a very pale pastel yellow, and the African Shadow is a very very dark and muted purple, and what this is doing is giving us the ability to set up the teeth appropriately. Now, as this goes across, we're going to be adding in more and more Tenere Yellow into that mix to establish the main color of those teeth, instead of just letting it be stark changes as we're going across. Okay, so once the mixes are down, we're going to go into just Tenere Yellow, and then that'll start really establishing our main color of the teeth. And then at the end here, we're going to be using white sands to add in the final highlights. Now, in this case, you can really choose where you want the highlights to sit, whether it be like wearing towards the end, almost like tusks or horns, kind of like what I'm doing. So you're drawing the paint towards the end of the teeth. You could choose to go completely inverted here if we really wanted to, and have the base of the teeth be the brighter color, and then the end of the teeth be the darker color if we're looking for I don't know, a cool inverted effect. And I might do that for a future squad of these guys once this first one's all done. It'd be neat to see the reverse get played. To base coat all the metal here, we're going to be using Thrash Metal from scale 75. It's very tinny, it's not clean, and it's not really dark either. I don't know, it's a cool color to take a look at. It's not like gunmetal or Stormhost Silver or one of those types of colors. It does look off, rather than being like a pure metal. It kind of looks like it should inherently have some impurities in it. Now, basically the reason it's off screen right now is that there is, for the jaw armor, pretty close sections to where the skin is and where the gums and the teeth that we already finished painting. So I'm just trying to be careful not to splash paint everywhere. And it's right here that I realized that I wanted to make that squig brighter. So we're going to go back in with the white to create new highlight zones for us to layer on more reds. Alright, now highlight number one here is going to be Vallejo Model Air Italian Red. It is a very bright red. I love it. It's fantastic. I didn't think I originally wanted to use this color, but after seeing everything else kind of come together, like the teeth and how dark the Night Goblin is, we want to brighten up that squig to make it a pretty solid contrast for us. we established some more specific places that we want the last highlight to be, and here I'm using Vallejo Model Aero Light Red. It does look like it's an orange when you're looking at it in the pot, but it definitely does come out red, and especially once it dries and fades into the rest of the model, it will not be as orangey as we're seeing here. Because it is so precise, I was trying to just get it a little bit closer to the eyes to make sure I don't miss it, and that my head isn't in the camera, but as you can see, we're getting some more bright options available to us. Okay, so the cool thing is that you can see what it looks like now that the light red's all dry, so it doesn't look like it's orange, it definitely still looks red, but it gives a good difference between the mouth, which should be more pinkish, compared to the rest of the body. Now here, we mixed together some Thrash Metal with some Heavy Metal, both by skill 75, and we're starting to highlight all the metal incredibly off screen, but then I'll realize where we are, so we go back on screen. We might go off screen again, we'll go back and forth here, unfortunately. But you're just going to be selective in where you're starting to put this new color on, because we're trying to create kind of a reflective surface where should shadows be sitting without having to rely on a wash. Okay, so if you see, like on the top pieces, we're looking to highlight. On the bottom pieces, we're just looking at that bottom rim, that bottom edge, feathering it in to make sure that we can get what looks like a nice reflection. The next highlight that's going to be even more selective than the last one was is using just Heavy Metal. And now this is like what your normal like Stormhost Silver or Vallejo Model like Steel or Silver would look like if you're using different paint lines more than like away from what I'm using here. But like what your traditional, like I like to think of like old Mithril Silver, this is what you'd be looking at. And just a quick little shot of what the project looks like so far. There's all the silver on. Alright, so we're going to go in with an Armour Wash here. This is made with Dollar Rowney inks and Matte Medium and Floyd. Look up Lester Bursley wash recipe to find out how I made this. This is what we're taking a look at. In terms of just trying to dinge up that metal, I'm not really trying to think about using it as a wash per se to create shadows, but to create dirt, grime, etc. across all the shiny bright pieces that we just did. So Squig Champ's head, all the face armor, the boots, the shoulder pads, and the moon sickle that he has. Okay, so he is like jumping off of a mushroom, and in a lot of the cases for these minis, they actually have like smoke trails or like spore trails coming out of them. I mixed together flat black and violet here, and we're just adding in more and more violet right now just to establish some purplish colors coming out of those mushrooms. Once the violet mix is all dried, we're going to make another mix with violet and pale skin, or any kind of like just basic flesh tone or like pale gray that you have on your palette. In this case, it looks a lot like a Daemonette flesh. We're going to wash it all with Drukai Violet in the end anyways to try to bring the colors all together. You can stipple this on. Don't think about blending it in, because it should be spores. There should be texture into that smoke, because you can see it's actually like kicking up and jumping off of one of those mushrooms down at the bottom. In a moment, we're going to see what the base looks like all done. I just wrapped that up quick, like off camera. Basic, like for the sand would be something like a burnt umber, and then Eshin Gray, and then Dawnstone over top of it. It's basically what I did. Put on some tufts. The mushrooms were done in like Menoth white base, Menoth white highlight, and then white. I grabbed a dark green, gave it some dots to make it look like some different types of mushrooms, and then wash it all with sepia as well. But you're going to see that coming up momentarily. Now, I don't normally finish bases this early into a paint job, but for whatever reason, I was just wanting to like kind of bring it all back together. So that's what I did there. The face here is being base coated in Caliban Green, because it is a solid dark green that covers really well. Alright, Caliban Green's all dry. Armor's on. We're going to use a fine airbrush and start doing his flesh tone. Main color here is Scale 75's Irati Green. I like my goblins nice and vibrant. More recent GW stuff has had them, I don't know, quote-unquote more realistic. Think about the flesh color differences between like old school orcs and goblins versus the Iron Jaws that came out more recently. This is going to be a little bit more comic book-ish, I guess you could think, but I like it. It also adds on some nice bright varieties, as opposed to the very drab and dark robes that they're all wearing. So, hooray for spot colors. The last highlight that we have here for him is just Spring Green by Scale 75. Escorpina Green would be an equivalent in like Vallejo styles or Vallejo colors. I don't know what the current GW line would be like for an equally bright green. Warpstone? I think Warpstone Glow sounds like it should be, but I'm not too sure. Okay, so I skipped over some boring BL10 washes and an extra highlight of Spring Green, but this is where, I don't know, it's kind of fun to remember that you don't have to use an airbrush to get some cool effects in. So I'm going to highlight that Eclipse Gray that we had all across his robes with Anthracite Grey. And I'm just being liberal with this. I'm thinking about top-down mentality. It's good shots of my fingers instead of the model, but where would it be brighter? And just the reason that we're doing this is that black is very rarely actually black, so even our base color isn't black, it's a really, really dark gray, and here we're starting to highlight every part of the robes. So there's a lot of really just big smooth spaces across his robe, and what I'm going to do is just start basically highlighting in small strokes, either from the edge or in places that I want to be brighter. And it doesn't always have to be in like uniform fashion. You can see here that I'm just hitting just across the middle of the Anthracite Grey that we put up before, just drawing lines back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and what it's doing is establishing our highlights. Now, You can say like, hey, this looks sloppy. Now we're obviously going to put a filter over top of this in regards to like glazes or washes, but again, like I could have done this with an airbrush, but I want to see texture. I want to see guys that live underground and that aren't necessarily smooth. Like organic things are smooth, like the skin of the squig. But this should look like it's been hit, like it's been damaged. Only other thing that I did here, as you can see that the horns on his hood have been done, so that was just Scale 75's African Shadow, and then I want to say white sands through the airbrush just to hit it, just to give a quick transition, because I didn't really care about it. I just needed to get that part done because it was bothering me. And this is what it looks like when we're done drawing on all those lines. Okay, so I hit all the rubs with Nuln Oil, not the gloss, just Nuln Oil, and you can see that it brought all those colors together pretty well. Now what I'm doing here is I laid down a stencil from Fallout Hobbies, one of their checker patterns. Normally an airbrush stencil, but in this case I'm going in just with a brush and I'm using Nakar from Scale 75 to start blocking up some checkers. And I took off the stencil. This is what it looks like. Now I'm going to eventually go in and draw some extra squares and fill out all those just to make sure that it matches itself up a little bit better. For the wood handle, we're going to use Dubai Brown by Scale 75 as a base coat. Alright, now in the same way that I was just mixing together colors on my palette for the teeth, we're going to be doing the same thing for the wooden handle, and I can't believe that I'm not on shot here. Well, that goes to show I haven't filmed anything for a little while, but we're mixing in Tenere Yellow into the Dubai Brown to start lightening or brightening up the wood grain, and we'll start drawing on lines with just Tenere Yellow, like this. Come on, go back. No, I'm not going to go back. There we go. So drawing on lines, and then just mixing in white, drawing on lines more and more and more. We will eventually just go in with just Nakar again to draw the string, and then slap some yellow on the weird little bell half moon that he has on his sickle. Okay, and now the last thing that I wanted to do was weather things even more, because, well, if you think about environments that grow a lot of mushrooms, they were generally very humid environments, which would cause rust to happen to metal. So I'm going to put some water and scale 75 rust orange together, and we're just going to start hitting different areas on all the metal pieces. Pigments are super fun because they can dry very flat. You hit them with a varnish, they stay there forever, or some pigment fixer. Once they're dry, you can move them around a lot afterwards. So here, we're just focusing on places that I think it should rest and cause some rust. So it's for all the armor as well as the weapon, just being selective about where we're putting it. Alright, and then as we wrap up the rust here, taking a look at the back, the inside and some of the back of the moonsicle, we'll be wrapping up this tutorial. We're going to get a quick 360 of what the guy looks like, and then we'll go from there. Thank you guys again very much for watching. I hope you liked this tutorial. It's not Blackstone. Had to take a break from that a little bit because I was Blackstoned out. But really stoked to get my hands on some of the new Gitz. I have a lot of armies I'm trying to work on myself. I have my daughters Kane and Idneth, but this is something that's really appealing. We're probably going to see some more projects on the channel. Probably not on the Squig, although I really want to do a Mangler Squig, but likely we're going to see some Dankhold Troggoths in the very near future. So again, guys, thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe to the channel, do all that jazz. And tell me what you want to see painted in the future. Hopefully I can see it fit into the budget, and we can take a look at it sooner rather than later. Have a good one. Bye.